What's going on? Sometimes I have the feeling that we are so far off today in modern society, and here in the Western world at least, that people don't even know what the real health actually is. And I get this feeling, especially when a couple of middle-aged people talk about all the medications that they already take. I mean, I take this against insomnia, then I take this against the side effects of the meds against insomnia, then I take this against high blood pressure, and then I take this against high cholesterol and whatnot. I mean, these people are so far off, they can't even see anymore how far they are away actually from their health path or from their optimal self. And it doesn't really matter as well because they don't need it. They're living in civilization where everything aids them wherever they can, so they don't need to be their optimal self anymore, and consequently, they aren't. Simple as that. However, I will try to present here a little bit of a list of true health markers for whatever purpose you want to you might use this. You can use it to assess your own health, of course, first of all, and not only that, you can also use it to assess the health of a potential partner. Someone you met out there, and you're considering, you want to have children at some point, and of course, most people want to have healthy children. I mean, having an unhealthy child and some dependent child, this can be a real horror for some people. So you can greatly influence your chances here by getting a mate who is in very good health himself, knows a bit about nutrition and stuff like that. So these are some true health markers that you can see. I mean, a lot of them you can actually see on their surface. So you can assess their constitution. Do they have a good constitution? And you can assess your own constitution even more accurately, because you can listen. You can even listen inside of your body, what you can't with another person. So let's start here with skin. We should have smooth, soft appearance of the skin, especially for females. There should be a high elasticity. We should have no cellulite. The cellulite thing on females requires proper composition of subcutaneous fats and fatty acids and proper protein provision. Now, these are some things that are rare, really rare in modern Western society, because we get a lot of heated vegetable oils, we get a lot of plant fats in general, which is total wrecking for our system in general. Not only for cellulite, I mean, it causes cellulite obviously because these soft, oily fats, they don't belong into a human body at least, and they disintegrate, so to say, the composition of the skin and the texture, as well as protein provision. We need proper amino acids to synthesize this collagen, this elasticity of the skin to keep it young. Good skin comes from inside, so skin is really a good health marker, a good direct true health marker. We should have no acne. Acne is always a sign of internal toxicity of some sort. It can be toxins, it can be too much cooked substances, too much cauterized substances which are carried out of your body via white blood cells through these pimples and stuff like that. So we should have no eye bags. I mean, the eye bag thing, that's a tricky one actually, because it requires good sleep over a consistent period of time, which is hard for a lot of people to get in modern society. And just as well as a clean digestive tract. If you're plagued by digestive problems, then you tend to sleep less well, and therefore these things can cause eye bags. So we should have no eye bags, or at least as little as possible. We should have a clear tongue. I put this into the skin thing as well, because it's a body surface as well. The clear tongue is very important, because if you have a white layer on your tongue, or actually it's not on your tongue, but it's slightly below your tongue, then this is very indicative of candida overgrowth, and this is indicative obviously of a non-ideal diet. because no human should have fungal forms of candida inside of their body. You should only have the single cell form of candida in your body, which has certain purposes and certain tasks to do, and it would be stupid to eradicate them. However, you don't want to have it overgrown into the fungal form. We should have no rashes and no dandruff, obviously. Yeah, also in susceptible areas like the scalp, the eyelids, behind the ears. And this all requires a non-inflamed digestive tract and therefore an absence of food intolerances and allergies. And this again requires a high stomach acid. It requires sometimes also freedom from certain parasites who can influence stomach acid to the negative. I talked about this previously. Parasites and candida actually thrive in an alkaline environment. If you have not a sustainable acidic digestive environment, which you should have as an obligate carnivore, as an at least over 50% carnivore, then you're gonna drive yourself into some problems. This can, cause all sorts of things. Intolerances against food, obviously, because you're not breaking down food properly anymore. This can result in allergies over the long period of time. But usually these things are reversible, actually. I mean, most people don't know this, but allergies come and go, for certain people. They appear at some point in their life, and at some point they go again. Why is this the case? Well, because their internal, their digestive environment changed. Their bacterial composition changes over the time, and it becomes more favorable, and at other times it becomes more unfavorable. I mean, these people don't know what they're doing. They're just eating basically their food, and some of it is good, by a coincidence, and some of it is bad. So yeah, look out for these signs as well. You don't want to have any fungal infections like candida or athlete's foot. This requires, again, strong immune system. It requires, again, an acidic digestive environment. You want to have strong hair and nails. Thick, elastic, non-brittle, colorful hair. No early graying or balding. No white spots on nails. All these things, they are signs of good protein digestion and assimilation. If you don't have them, if you have strong hair and thick nails and non-brittle nails and no white spots and stuff. You also want to have good, solid, fast wound healing with as little scar formation as possible. And this requires, again, good provision with vitamin E, C, zinc, and protein provision, for the collagen synthesis. You want to have these slightly rosy cheeks, slightly rosy cheeks, a very simple sign of good health. This is something that our elderly knew all the time. They love it when their grandchildren have these rosy, puffy cheeks, because it's an indicator of good nutrition and of liveliness, of vitality. It requires good circulation and oxygen saturation of the blood, which again requires good iron provision, and it requires also clean pores. And clean pores in general is a good direct health marker. It requires clean sweat and suet and the absence of congestion of these areas, of the lymph predominantly. And otherwise, if you don't have the clean pores, again, this is always some sort of detox symptom. Some sort of thing wants to be carried out of your body here via white blood cells, and your body is obviously gonna do that. You want to have no bad odor, and obviously we're excluding effects of sexual chemistry here. I mean, some men just simply smell like testosterone. This is not an unhealthy thing. Otherwise, if you have bad odor, this kind of foul stuff, and especially also through the mouth, and this can be a detox symptom. Often this is a sign of food rotting inside of your digestive tract, because it didn't get digested properly. And then you basically breathing out these fumes, these gases which are created there. I mean, not every gas that you create in your digestive system gets farted out. You have to understand that some of them can be taken up into your system very easily, and then they get sweated out or detoxed through some other path. You also want to have a clean genital region, obviously. You want to have a noticeable layer of firm, juicy fat. And this is again especially true for females and races living in temperate zones or colder with seasons, zones which have seasons, where you have to have this kind of fatty protection against the cold simply. You know, a healthy, juicy, firm layer of fat is something that is very important, especially for females, considering that there is always the opportunity that they might get pregnant. And this takes a lot of calories and a lot of good stuff, good molecules, organic molecules, from which the baby can grow. And yeah, so you want to look out for that as well. The next big chapter is eyesight. The eyesight is under heavy attack in modern civilization. I mean, the people around us who have to wear glasses because otherwise they can't read or they can't look far into the, far away basically, is rampant. I mean, there's hardly people anymore beyond their 30s who don't have glasses. Obviously, this is also propaganda and fear mongering from doctors because they want to make money off that, as usual, as they want with everything, with anything basically. Another thing that you also have to know that once you have ruined your eyesight to a certain degree, it is still reversible by getting the proper nutrients in. However, I mean, if you get adapted to glasses over a longer period of time, then it's really your brain that gets adapted to them, And then again, once you leave them out, you have to recalibrate your brain here for your, to get the focus point right and stuff like that. So really, if you discover that you have slightly reduced eyesight than before, try first to change up your lifestyle, your nutrition, predominantly to the better, and see if it goes away that way. And only then consider getting glasses. But even then, I wouldn't wear glasses or contact lenses 100% of the time. It's really not a healthy thing. But anyway, you want to have sharp, close to far vision. This requires an elastic, clear cornea and additionally strength of the attached muscles, which is basically the iris, and an absence of congestion. Lymph and candida can really be a thing here in the eyes. Really, there are lymph vessels in the eye, as well as blood vessels, obviously. But the lymph vessels are really those which can be congested back into the eyes, really, and this can give you some sort of blurry vision and stuff like that. You should have no sticky eyes. This is another one. Also in the morning. If you have sticky eyes in the morning and a lot of this sand accumulating on your eyelids, this could be indicative of candida yet again, or parasites, some sort of parasites who work at night in your digestive tract, excrete toxins, and then you have to excrete them through your eyes basically. Again, I'm mentioning parasites here really often, but as I stated in another episode I think before, not all parasites are bad. I think actually most parasites are at most commensal, which means that they have no effect on your body, and a lot of them are actually good, which means that they are symbionts. They have a positive effect on the efficiency of your body, the efficiency of your digestion, and this could be because they get rid of old decaying tissue, of diseased toxified cells, So don't go on a war against your parasites, but I'm just mentioning it here because it could be a reason for that. I mean, not all parasites are good. Remember, nature is not black and white. You should have good night vision and good color vision. This requires a well-saturated retina, and this requires a good vitamin A provision. And you should have a clear, colorful, beautiful iris. All these are very indicative to quality of the germ plasms really that this human had in their developmental period, and even the quality of the mother and the father, their nutrition essentially 2 years up to 3 years before they had sex with each other, before they mated to create you. So all this influences how good your eyesight finally is after all these years. The reason for that is that eyesight is one of these points in the body, the eyes, which require a very complex and fine-tuned developmental process, because there is a very fine and complex biological architecture at work here. I mean, if you look at an eye, this is a fascinating construction, you know. And to develop all these things in a very, fine-tuned way, in a very precise way, you need these vitamins, especially during your developmental period. I think Wesley Price, was it, or some colleague of him who made an experiment with pigs. He deprives them from vitamin A during that developmental period, and some of them were simply born without eyes completely, and all of them had some sort of eye problem. Their eyes didn't develop properly. They were either blind or had very poor vision, because the architecture of the eye requires a lot of the vitamin A in the developmental period. So from the eyes we go to hearing, the ears. We should have no tinnitus, of course, and also very little other background noise. And this requires the absence of congestion of the auditive system and lymph, the proper innervation and vascularization for oxygen supply. These short little tinnitus attacks that people often have, this is most often actually a lack of oxygen in those systems, a temporary short lack of oxygen. And if they take a few deep breaths, it goes away, because the oxygen saturation in the blood goes up again, and then these areas get re-oxygenated. But it could be also something else. I mean, it could be also some sort of detox symptom. You should have no excessive earwax secretion. If you have, then this is actually the earwax pathway is one very often used by the body to excrete toxins, essentially. These fatty soluble toxins, from the brain area, from the head area, they often accumulate there, because the head is actually a very metabolically active part of the body, because again, we have the brain sitting in there, and the brain uses up to 25% of the calories of the body, So yeah, if we are toxic, we are very often toxic in the head, and one sign of this is excessive earwax secretion. You should have good hearing sensitivity from low to high frequencies. This is indicative again of the quality of the germplasms of the person, and even the quality of the nutrition of their parents up to 3 years before they started to create you. And again, simply because there is a very fine architecture here, a very fine biological architecture at work. Now we come to a big one, and this is dental health. As you can see, we are moving around the head here a lot, because the head is where the most finest biological architecture of our body takes place. We have the brain here, we have the eyes, we have the jaws, and dental health, which we are discussing right now. And then we have also the nasal pathways. And again, all these glands, the saliva glands, the earwax glands, the nasal glands, they can all be utilized by your body for detoxing. So again, the cleaner all of these excretions are, the better. So when we talk about dental health, we should have no active tooth decay, obviously, in any way, shape, or form. This requires high quality saliva, first of all, and absence of growing cavities and inflammation in the jaw area. We should have no pains or sensitivities during mastication or rest. And this requires a strong and smooth and enclosed enamel of the teeth. We should have no gingivitis, which is basically inflammation of the gums. And this means pink, firm flesh of the gums. We should have no exposed roots. And all of these things, they could be a sign of beginning calcium, deficiency. First of all, it causes, of course, tooth decay, and then secondly, it causes gingivitis. Now, the thing with teeth in general is teeth are a very special thing in your body because they require a hell lot of calcium to be calcified in a density that they can build the hardest structures in your body, essentially. So they need a hell lot of calcium for that, but it's getting hard for the body because, the teeth, they are not completely covered by flesh. So there is not this opportunity that the body has with other bones inside of the body, that it can innervate and vascularize them from every angle. No, actually the teeth are only connected via the root with the body. And the other part of the teeth of these bones is actually, going out into the air, basically, into your mouth cavity. So there is not really an opportunity for the body to deliver nutrients to these bones other than the roots, and actually the saliva as well, because there's actually very, very small channels in teeth through which all the time some fluid is passing, and it's also the quality of this fluid that determines whether you are going to develop cavities or not. Teeth are very alive. People don't know this because it makes big bucks for the dentists, obviously. But teeth are very alive, and even a tooth that has a cavity, the cavity can still resolidify and create new enamel from inside if the nutritional situation is good enough, essentially. So you need a good calcium balance inside of your body to uphold these crazy bones who are even standing out of your body. It takes the body really a good calcium supply to uphold this strange situation. And in general, calcium supply is calcium distribution, I should say, throughout the body is one very direct health marker, and one that gets deteriorated very obviously if we age, because what happens essentially is that calcium gets redistributed from the bones into the soft tissue and calcifies it, which is of course something that you don't want, whereas at the same time the bones, they get osteoporosis, So as you can see, the calcium gradients inside of your body, to uphold them by your body, it takes quite a lot of good nutrients to do that, especially vitamin D and other fat-soluble vitamins. And you can't pound carbohydrates all the time, because carbohydrates mess up the osmolarity of your blood and require your body to leach calcium from your bones to balance out this osmolaric shock, so to say. I'm inventing a lot of words here, I'm sorry, but I'm just trying to explain these connections here. Anyway, you should have no gaps in between your teeth. You should have no abscesses. You should have proper tooth alignment, proper occlusion of the jaws. And this requires proper facial development and symmetry. It's something that is very rarely seen in modern society. Another very good direct health marker are wide dental arches and palate. Its absence in the form of crooked teeth and malocclusion and pinched nostrils, all these symptoms of so-called mouth breathers, they are all very indicative of the quality of the germplasms of the parents and their nutrition 3 years before they created you. And also your developmental period. Again, we have here a very fine and complex biological architecture when it comes to the jaws and teeth alignment and stuff like that. Think about how well your body has to be developed so that the lower jaw hits perfectly onto the upper jaw. I mean, there is no direct connection to that apart from the jaw joint, which is somewhere sitting there in the hind region of your head, and still your body has to very finely calculate where these teeth, these molars, hit each other, to create a perfect occlusion. So again, this is very fine biological architecture here, and something like that always requires a good nutrition and So then we come to the mind. The mind is really interesting as well, and for most people very obvious to see again. You should have access to a reasonable degree of common sense and logic. You should have no excessive mood swings, especially for males. You know, males with mood swings, I mean, that's not a male, that's a female. For females, it's very okay to have mood swings because, again, they have their period, they have hormonal swingings throughout the month, essentially. So they can get a little bit of leeway here. I mean, they should not be crazy, yeah. There's no reason to be crazy, but they should have a little bit of leeway in that regard. We should have no addictions, no eating disorders, and this again requires a clean digestive tract, the absence of dysbiosis in the form of a pathogenic yeast or bacteria or parasite, or overgrowth and accompanying cravings for junk food and stuff like that. I mean, all these eating disorders are essentially a result of a bad effect that food has on your body. You know, if you get super obese, this is something that has to do with food addiction. If you get anorexic, then this has something to do with not proper utilization of your foods. And also, this is a very mind thing, you know. This person essentially got brainwashed into believing that in what we have as models nowadays is something that is worth striving for and is healthy, which is of course not. You should have the ability to concentrate and learn, the ability to form relationships. You should have no brain fog. You should have no tics, quote unquote. You know, no excessive tics like nail biting and stuff like that. Nail biting actually can be a sign of nutrient deficiency. There should be no autism, no chronic anxiety, no schizophrenia, and you should, I hate to say it, but there should be no homosexuality present or transsexuality. There's actually evidence that these things could be caused by certain parasites which reside in your gut and in your in your sexual glands, essentially. And this is where they try to proliferate, you know, and they can create these weird sexual orientations to essentially spread themselves. This is one possible explanation, you know. Other possible explanations is simply that these these individuals got somehow brainwashed or somehow a little bit off simply in their mind, and it's simply not natural, you know. Naturality is always associated with health, and for humans, for Homo sapiens, it's not natural to be homosexual. If we take a look into the past, we will see that homosexuality is always associated with civilization. If we have a naturally living tribe, you know, there are no homosexuals. It just doesn't occur. And of course, now we are so far off from our nature that even something like transsexuality occurs from time to time. And this is actually incredible. I mean, yeah, we are really goddamn degenerated, I tell you this much. But anyway, this is something to look out for as well. We should have no depression, we should have no related symptoms and other mental retardation. This requires clean and properly working digestive systems, again, because the gut and the mind, the brain, they are connected via a lot of nerves, a lot of blood vessels, and something that affects the gut negatively will always affect your mind negatively. The gut-mind connection is really important here. Generally, a human being that is characterized through contentment, happiness, capacity, and simply, quote-unquote, good character. And all these things, yeah, they are really indicative of the quality of the germplasms as well. Most people believe that this is something that you can learn, you know, during your developmental period, but it has been shown actually that 95% of your character is built in your physical structure. You know, this is not something that you learn via education or stuff like that. The wellness, the developedness of your character is very connected with how many good nutrients you get and stuff like that. We see this in wild living tribes. They essentially don't have any criminals, you know, so there is no need for prisons or stuff like that. They all are generally very happy, and they jump around the fire and sing around. Very social animals, very social humans. It's really amazing to watch them. And then we go to the next chapter, which is sleep. Quick and easy falling asleep in the evening, quick and easy waking up in the morning. We should have a quote unquote high contrast in our sleeping pattern. It's not this thing where you feel like you are asleep all the time during the day, and during the night you cannot properly fall asleep. This is a low contrast in your sleeping pattern. We want to have high contrast in our sleeping pattern. Easy sleep, we shouldn't sleep super long. You have to realize the better and denser your sleep is, the less hours of sleep you need per day, obviously. So it shouldn't be the case that you require like 10 hours of sleep per day. You should have at most 8 hours per day, and there's people who are getting away with 6 or 5 hours because their sleep is so good, and because they are not making a lot of physical activity maybe during the day. You should obviously have no insomnia. You should have no rushing thoughts once you go to sleep. No dry eyes and crystallized excretions around the eyelids during sleeping, and especially during waking up. Again, this can be a detox symptom of some sort. You should have no snoring and no sleep apnea. This requires a clean and non-inflamed respiratory passage, especially of the nose. And I've talked about this before. Again, if your nose is congested, this can be a sign of detoxification. The body uses these pathways to get rid of toxins from the head area. And it also requires an absence of infections and certain parasites, which again can be present if there is too much dead, decaying tissue in that area. You should have good nasal breathing all the time during your sleep, and a closed mouth. You shouldn't be a mouth breather. Next chapter, respiration. No nasal or bronchial congestion, no overproduction of mucus. This could be a detox symptom again, or some acute sickness, some acute infection. You should have no asthma, no allergy problems. This requires, again, avoiding vaccines as well. Some vaccines really cause lifelong allergies against airborne substances like pollen and stuff like that. So obviously you should stay away from vaccines, which only exist to make money for pharmaceutical companies and doctors. You should have a functional, you should be functional. Respiratory system should be functional, obviously, also under the impact of physical efforts and sports. It should be properly developed. There was this notion amongst wild living tribes that especially the men, they have really properly developed wide chests. And this attributes greatly to their endurance. These people can run. They can literally run down wild animals. And in fact, this is how a lot of them hunted in earlier days. They chased down animals. So this required them to have more endurance than the animals that they hunted, obviously. Now, for men, this means especially wide chests. And also especially if these people are living on higher altitudes. This is something that was observed, I think, with tribes in the South Americas who lived in the Andes. They all had these very healthy wide chests to get up to this low oxygen saturation in the air up there. Then we have speech. You should have a full voice. This is something, again, a lot of people think this is genetics, but we are naturally constituted to have actually a full voice. And this requires well-developed vocal cords and oral cavity. Again, wide dental arches. If you have wide dental arches, you have a very good acoustic, of your mouth, and this enables you, I should say, to sing very beautifully. And this is something that we observe amongst these wild people as well. These wild living tribes, they all have their rituals, where they dance around the fires and sing together, and they sing just incredibly beautifully and well. Whereas here in the Western world, people are struggling to find the next opera singer, once the old one is dying, because there's less and less well-developed mouth areas, well-developed wide dental arches with good acoustics. So we're really struggling here in the Western world to uphold these singers. We should have, of course, no speech defects. This requires proper tooth alignment again and a clear mind. And we should have no stuttering and no lisping. Then we get to the next chapter, which is the cardiovascular system. We should have good capacity here in general during aerobic strains on the body. Again, this relates to the endurance. You should have, of course, no atherosclerosis, which costs you a lot of capacity in that regard. You should have good endurance. This requires a proper heart and lung development, elasticity and permeability of the veins and arteries of the vascular system, which again, no atherosclerosis, no plaques, no calcification of soft tissues. And then we get into another big one, and that's digestion. You should have, of course, no diarrhea. This could be some sort of detox. You should have no constipation, no steatorrhea, which is the increased fat content in stool, which is indicative of a fat malabsorption and a fat maldigestion. And this again is indicative of a weak stomach acid or other indigestion and must be addressed therefore. So we should have therefore no overly sticky stools. This could be again detox symptom or steatorrhea. Stools should be fluffy, which means basically a low density, but they should not float on the water level. This is something that's very important. They should not be too dried out and not too watery. They should be, not too constipated essentially and not too diarrhea-ly, respectively. And they should be guided by a small little mucus layer which makes them glide effortlessly. And there should be no hematochezia, which is blood in the stool. And this is, of course, indicative of physical damage to the gut lining, e.g., for example, caused by ulcers or leaky gut, or certain cancers, maybe some unfavorable parasites, and a general lack of proper mucus lining. And this is something that's very important to protect your gut lining, in the long run from something that's happening in your bowels. You should have little gas and absolutely no smelly gas. This is indicative of low stomach acid and SIBO-like conditions, small intestine bacterial overgrowth, certain parasites again, candida overgrowth. All these can cause indigestion essentially, and this can cause smelly gas. You should have no bad breath. Again, we've talked about this before. Bad breath can be caused via internal putrefaction of not properly digested foods, because gases get taken up by the body as well and don't leave the bowel cavity just like that all the time. Very regular and easy bowel movements. And with very regular, I mean essentially you get up in the morning, first thing you do, you go to the toilet, you leave your bowels super easily, and then it's done for the day. And you don't run to the toilet like 3-4 times a day. This shouldn't be necessary, okay? You should have one clean, nice defecation per day. And you should have no hemorrhoids, of course, no excessive need for toilet paper. This again relates to the stickiness of your stool. You should have no hematuria, which is blood in the urine, obviously. This is very indicative of infection or more serious disease, and maybe a failure of your kidneys to reabsorb red blood cells or anything like that. You don't want to have it essentially. So you should have rarely sediment in your urine. You should have no pains and little digestion sounds in general. Little burping. Again, this requires strong stomach acid. Burping is in fact often a sign of weak stomach acid. You should have no distended belly, no overeating. This again requires efficient digestion and nutrient-dense nutrition and proper absorption. You should have no food intolerances. Again, could be caused by a dysbiosis of your gut flora. And this is something that you don't want as well. Relative independency from food combining, sequencing, and timing. Quote unquote, an iron stomach. This simple notion that, you can eat whatever you want and you're not gonna get digestive upsets, this is something that only our youth, an ability that only our youth still retains. They can eat whatever they want and not develop any problems. If we get older, we're getting more sensitive to these kind of things. And it's essentially a sign of good health if you have an iron stomach, if you can eat whatever you want and you will just digest it wonderfully. Yeah, if you have that, be happy with that and try to keep it up. Uh, Again, no eating disorders. This requires proper food and the absence of gut dysbiosis and a clear mind. Digestion is very indicative of the state of all internal organs in general, including immune system, nervous system, even brain, and quote-unquote soul or character, or lack thereof. All diseases start in the gut. There is something to this. The gut is so connected via the rest of our body, and the gut has such an incredibly high amount of surface, simply. I mean, it's like 3 football fields or something inside of us there. So this is really our biggest connection to our environment. And if something's wrong in there, the rest of the body will have some sort of troubles. That's just the way it is. So really try to keep your digestive tract as healthy, as efficient, as proper functioning as possible. And we have a few female-specific things to talk about. We should have no frequent bladder infections. This is something a lot of females struggle nowadays in the modern society, simply because they get fed the pill and antibiotics and stuff like that, which upsets their bacterial flora, and especially the bacterial flora of the sexual organs. And yeah, we should have no painful periods. No painful periods. This is also something that is rampant today. Almost all of them suffer from some sort of pains during their period. And you have to realize that for women who are living in wild tribes, all of these subjects, periods, and also the coming down of a new individual, giving birth to a child, all these things happen extremely easily and with no effort. There are no problems in that regard. All these problems that we have nowadays, where we need cesarean section for every birth, and we are always having these infections and stuff like that. This is a phenomenon of modernity. For a woman who's living in a tribe, it was not rare that they had like 7 or 8 children or something, and every time they got a new child, they just simply disappeared into the bush, and 10 minutes later they came back and had a child on their arm. That's how this is supposed to work, or that's how it worked, at least in tribal societies. So this again is just a symptom of to see how far we are off, how far we are away from our ideal constitution. You should have very regular periods as well. You should have a good sex drive and attractiveness. This is very important for females. Again, health is natural and health is attractive. This is especially true for females, because that's what males are looking for in a female, a proper, healthy individual, which has a good firm fat layer, which we talked about previously. Again, relatively easy childbearing and delivery. This requires very good nutrient provision, and in fact, a lot of tribes out there knew that they had to give special foods to females who wanted to become mothers, They gave them liver, they gave them all these nutrient-dense seafoods, special seafoods, which also act as some sort of aphrodisiacs. And all these things enabled them to have a relatively easy childbearing and delivery. And yeah, that's how they also ensured a proper constitution of the child, It's not only beneficial for the mother, but also for the child, obviously, that gets born there. And consequently, this child, again, develops good eyesight, develops good dental arches and stuff like that. Easy and sufficient lactation. Another thing that modern women struggle a lot with. A lot of them do not produce enough milk, again, because this requires good nutrient provision. And in fact, the quality of the milk can differ greatly. there's like up to threefold, 3 times more saturated fatty acids in breast milk of healthy mothers compared to breast milk of not so healthy mothers. So just because you're lactating, that doesn't mean that you produce high quality milk. Again, this is very dependent on your nutrient provision and the foods that you get during that period. And of course, this affects the health of your child greatly. And we have a few male-specific things. Number one, strong sex drive. A healthy male should have a strong sex drive. That's just the way it is. It's indicative of testosterone levels. You should have a frequent morning erection. This is again indicative of testosterone levels. And this is the time where your testes, saturate the blood with testosterone. So for the day essentially, and yeah, that's how that should work essentially. You should have a strong erection and ejaculation. This requires a healthy prostate, and all of the associated glands have to be healthy as well. The cardiovascular system and mind have to be healthy as well in order to allow that to happen. Now, something that's also very interesting is sperm quality. Obviously you have to have good sperm count. There should not be, half of your sperm cells should be that they are dead, like it is the case in modern man, in modern society. And again, somehow you can. I think the way you can control for that is if you have kind of how should I say, firm pieces in your sperm, in your semen essentially. Okay, your semen should be white, and it shouldn't be super fluid like water, but it also shouldn't be super sticky like almost firm. This is something you should be somewhere in the middle there. And other than that, your body will use again these glands, the prostate and the associated glands, also for detox. So if you're very toxic in that area, it can be that the quality of these fluids decrease, obviously. The same is true, by the way, for the vaginal fluids in females, okay? All these fluids should be clear, because this is a sign of general cleanliness and not of a toxic body. And then we have simple general physical capacity. You should have the ability to run, jump, climb and swim, play, throw, learn and remember. These classic human abilities, and you should carry them even in old age. This is the challenge. I mean, we all are healthy to some degree when we're young, but how to uphold these things in old age, that's where it gets interesting. You should have retained some sort of flexibility, rather elasticity, quote unquote, as in the opposite of stiffness, quote unquote, because this is very indicative of calcification of soft tissues, as I've mentioned before, and good range of motion, generally the assets of the child. So if we think of a child, the mobility of a child and the quickness and vitality, this is essentially what the challenge is, to uphold this into old age as much as possible. Absence as much as reasonably possible from old age diseases, quote unquote, like gout, atherosclerosis, dementia, Alzheimer's, back pain, joint pain, osteoporosis, etc. All these things are essentially the body failing to redistribute, or we should say distribute, certain minerals throughout the body. Again, the distribution of minerals requires a lot of nutrients and a proper working body, and it's that thing which gets attacked first if we lack all of these things. Soft tissue gets calcified, hard tissue gets decalcified, and the calcium concentration through our bodies essentially flattens out, and this is something we don't want. We want contrast in our bodies. We want hard bones and soft tissue at the same time. Again, this is all related to mineralization and other deconstruction of soft tissues, and is reflecting an inability of the body to redistribute minerals and other nutrients properly throughout the body itself. The reason why we even have to think about all this is because we are not living in the wild anymore, essentially, where all this is normal and natural. Under civilization, this natural health This absence of problems inside of the body is under heavy attack and already lost for centuries in most families. Yeah, think about it. Wild people are enabled to focus on problems that nature provides them with from the outside, while almost neglecting the inside. And pretty much the opposite is true for us. We cannot even concentrate on the problems anymore that nature provides for us, and there are very little problems that are provided for us because we are living in this civilization where everything is helped. We are aided by so many machines nowadays that we don't even have all these problems anymore. And yet we are almost 90% of the time occupied with thinking of some sort of an internal issue that we have because of our modern lifestyles. So this really also at the same time impacts the efficiency, the functionality of us humans to the negative, and gives more and more responsibility to those beautiful machines who are aiding us to live in our degenerated selves until we die at an old age, uh, completely losing the functionality of our bodies. So yeah, something to think about. Keep this checklist in mind if you want to stay healthy and if you want to find a healthy partner.